Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 15th of October of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to discuss the global scope, the global situation of the special military operation. We know that currently the Russians are counterattacking in the vicinity of the Bradley Square, and the Russians managed to achieve some success and results and force the Ukrainians to step back. We know that there are some clashes and activity of the Russian forces in the north of Priyutine, and also the Russians are trying to storm Novomikhailivka from the north and from the south, and this is also the results. And also in these two operations, the Russians is the side who are trying to counterattack, not the Ukrainians. We see that the Ukrainians took a decision to go into the depth defense. Furthermore, we know that currently the Russians are trying to storm Avdiivka, and the Russians have already called this operation Avdiivka News, and all the Western countries who knows, but we understand the main purpose of the Russians according to the title of this special operation, Avdiivka News. When talking about Bakhmut and Artyomovsk, we know that Ukrainians stopped any attempts to continue their offensive operation in the direction of Kurdyumovka, Bakhmut, or on the northern flanks. The only thing that Ukrainians managed to achieve is to force the Russians to step back from these railway tracks from the Ukrainian side to the Russians. When talking about Kupiansk and Liman front line, we know that the Russians are attacking in this area. We don't have almost nothing from this territory, and I'm talking about geolocated videos, but the only thing we have is some reports from the Ministry of Defense regarding the losses and so on. So this is the global scope, and we see that Ukrainians are currently trying to defend themselves and they're not attacking. Furthermore, we got very interesting updates from Kiev. According to information we have, the Ukrainian authorities are planning to launch complete total mobilization, not the mobilization that we saw a year ago or months ago. This is going to be completely different mobilization. This is going to be a total mobilization. But you know that total mobilization is a very difficult thing. How are you going to support army? So obviously the Ukrainians, for example, if they have right now 1 million army, let's say, or 500,000 soldiers or 700,000 soldiers, doesn't matter. They're not going to increase the number, like for example from 500,000 to 1 million. Because they don't have money to support this army. They need to pay salaries, they need to pay money, they need to feed, they need to get more weapons, and so on and so on. So obviously the Ukrainians are planning to start total mobilization because they're planning to reduce their current army. Usually, when talking about the military science, every time a country launches mobilization, that means that the country is planning to attack. When talking about the Russians, they have their own strategies, and they try to sign contracts. And for example, a lot of Russian authorities reported that the Russians have signed contracts within around 400,000 soldiers. So it's something like a part of mobilization. So that means that the Russians are ready to attack. And the Ukrainians are planning to launch mobilization because they're planning to launch offensive operation, a very powerful offensive operation, and they will replace the losses. They have current losses with new mobilized forces. But the question is where exactly the Ukrainians are planning to attack. For example, today Vladimir Putin was interviewed by some Russian press, and he was asked lots of very interesting questions, and Putin gave us a lot of very interesting insights. And first of all, Putin told us that the Ukrainians were completely defeated during their greatest counter-offensive operation in the vicinity of the Bradley Square and the Vremivka tactical bridgehead and so on. Also, Vladimir Putin added one of the most important things that probably nobody mentioned, but I paid attention to this, and later we will discuss and you will understand what exactly Putin was talking about. Also, Putin told us that currently the Ukrainians are trying to concentrate forces at some directions. We see this. He told us that the Russians, Putin, the Russian military authorities see this concentration of forces, and the Russians are doing everything they can to prevent any negative things from this concentration of forces. So the question is where exactly the Ukrainians are concentrating their forces, what exactly the Ukrainians are planning to do, and what is the real purposes of Russian offensive operation in Avdiivka, or what is the real purposes of Avdiivka News operation. So now let's try to understand what was Putin talking about. And today when I was walking through the Western deployment maps, I found a very interesting detail, very interesting information that probably explained at least to me, everything. If you have access to the Western deployment map, you're gonna see that Ukrainians have redeployed significant number of their forces in direction of Nikolaev. To be more precise, the Ukrainians have completed the redeployment of 35th Marine Brigade in this area. The Ukrainians have completed their redeployment of 38th Marine Brigade. Also, the Ukrainians redeployed in this area 36th Marine Brigade and of course 37th Marine Brigade. So basically the Ukrainians completed the redeployment of 4 Marine brigades in direction of Nikolaev. These are brigades from the strategical reserves that during June, July and August took part in the battle for Vremivka tactical bridgehead. All those 4 brigades were involved in the battle for Vremivka, for Urozhaine, for Makarovka, Blagodatne, and some parts of those brigades, some battalions were exactly involved in those operations. And since, according to information we have, those brigades didn't lose their combat capabilities, but they were involved in combat. So basically, those 4 strategical brigades of strategical reserves, 35th, 36th, 37th, and 38th Brigade, haven't lost their combat capabilities. This is one thing. The second thing, they weren't defeated, they had real battle experience, and they are ready to do something. And this is very weird when talking about the situation, why the Ukrainians took a decision to redeploy their forces in Nikolaev. And obviously I understand, and now I understand the words of Putin, that one more time, he told us that we see that Ukrainians try to concentrate forces at some direction with attempts to start another offensive operation, and we do everything we have to prevent the failure or something bad consequences of that attack. So as I understand, the Ukrainians currently try to concentrate their forces along Dnipro River with the purpose to start crossing operation in this area. Everything explain us, at least Russian bombings with FAB-500, how the Russians were bombing heavily this territory during the previous days and months. We remember that if we increase even updates since the beginning of September, how the Russians were bombing this territory heavily with FAB-500. The cities like Berislav, these cities, we remember those cities that were under Russian attack, like Berislav, Kazatsky, Burgunka, Lvova, Tyaginka. All these cities were Adradokamyanka, Mykolaievka, all those cities were reduced to ruins as a result of usage of FAB-500 by the Russian side. But you need to understand the difference. The Russians were attacking not the forces of that strategical reserves like 37th, 36th Brigade. The Russians were bombing the positions of forces of 126th Territorial Defense Brigade, of 124th, 22nd, and probably 21st. The Ukrainians, using these 4 territory defense brigades, were using the main job. They were trying to develop their positions along the islands between Dnipro rivers. Those brigades of defense brigades captured the islands between Russian and Ukrainian banks of Dnipro River, all over the combat line, in between Kazachye Lagery, on the south of Kazatska, Adradokamyanka, Mykolaievka, on the south of Kherson, in the vicinity of Dachin and Antonov Bridge. All these islands were captured by the territory defense brigade. And as I understand, currently the Ukrainians have completed their operation, their mission, and I expect that even before the beginning of November, the Ukrainians will launch their crossing Dnipro operation with one purpose: to save the military aid and to save the investments from the Western countries, from the United States of America and so on. The Ukrainians don't have any other option. If they can't show any results, any progress from their side, they will lose the last finance, last investment, and the Western countries will turn their focus on Israel, and because nobody likes to lose, and no matter that Western countries have a lot of money, they also don't want to lose. And Israel, for example, from their perspective, is a very good short war that can be completed very fast, where the Western countries can be winners. And of course, it's always good to be winners. Furthermore, we know that United States of America is going to have elections very soon, and this is going to might be a very good case for Joe Biden in upcoming elections of 2024. So Zelensky is losing. He needs to start something to save the to save money and to save finance. And to do this, the only thing he has is to start landing operation on the Russian Bank of New River. During the previous day, the Ukrainians were bombing and attacking this territory with all types of weapons they have. For example, in this video we see how the Ukrainians managed to discover the Russian Uragan, and as a result of HIMARS strike, that Russian Uragan was destroyed. Furthermore, the Ukrainians continue attacking and bombing the Russian cities on this bank of the river, like Kazachie, Lahyry. The Ukrainians were bombing the cities like just a second, like Kazachie, Lahyry, like Pishanovka. On this video we see how the Ukrainians managed to discover the movements and redeployment of Russian forces, and as a result of